We're going to work with something that's not super familiar to a lot of people. Prana, Tejas, and Ojas. So this is part of our Ayurvedic series, and this time we're focusing on the mind. This book, Ayurveda and the Mind, The Healing of Consciousness, is by Dr. David Frawley, an Ayurvedic expert and a meditation person. He had a tight link with my meditation teacher, Swami Veda. They had a lot in common in the way they worked with the mind and consciousness. So Ayurveda, just generally, I love that quote from his book, A Great Inner Adventure into the Dimensions of Consciousness. And so much of what we work with in the mind is the stuff that's generated by the nervous system. And it makes sense. We need to be able to track what's a threat, what's safe. There's a quote from Deb Dana that someone brought up recently about the reason that we do this work is so that we can feel safe enough to really connect and to be authentic with other people, to rest in each other's presence and each other's arms with awareness and with safety. So in our community, we're often working with virtual arms. We're working with, can we connect with each other? And how can we work with the barriers of connection? And in our meditation practice, we're prevented from going as deeply into that connection as we might because of the way the mind works around, I need to be paying attention to this, catastrophic thinking, ruminating, the habits of the mind. We hold our breath. Our nervous system is alarmed. So that's part of what we're working with here is we work with the physical body, the food we eat, the sleep habits. Ayurveda is wonderful with those dimensions of life. And also to go deeper. What's the purpose of straightening out our life? Well, part of it is to enjoy our life, and part of it is so that we can go deeper. The body is a crystallization of the deep-seated mental tendencies. And they're talking specifically about reincarnation. And I also think it's true as we get older that we have these deep-seated mental tendencies from early childhood, developmental trauma as well. And that the mind, body, and spirit are one. And I remember in the 60s when Swami Rama came to North America, he was on the Phil Donahue show, which many of us would remember if we're that age. And he was talking about the mind, body as one and how radical it was back then. And now it's pretty accepted that we need to work with the whole of our system. So physical diseases are often due to external factors like diet and pathogens, but most mental diseases or conditions of the mind that aren't helpful are considered to be the wrong use of the senses and accumulation of negative emotions. So if we look at the senses, we live in a culture that's inundated with violent images, sexism, racism, wars, disruption due to wars like refugees. We have a lot of things coming in through our senses. And then we also have the dulling of our senses that we do through addictions and other things. So we have all of these psychological imbalances, and they really show up as physical illness, physical consequences. I find it interesting that this 5,000-year ancient India medical system is saying the same things that a lot of us are really tuning into now, that our way of life, Gabor Mate would say that it's toxic to humans. And in this book, he talks about it breeding unhappiness. So in order to really be happy, we need to be able to be in a state of balance and to live in harmony with nature. And in order to do that, we need to change how we think and live. So bringing in the doshas, vata, pitta, and kapha, is part of the reason we would look at this is to understand our own nature and understand others as well. So if we're going to have interactions with people that are safe and interesting and meaningful, it's very helpful if we know a little bit about our nature, but other natures as well. So in terms of the mind, vata is the air and ether element, characterized by this quick and agile mind, tend to be talkative, well-informed, When they're imbalanced, the mind wanders, there's a lack of determination, spaced out, absent-minded, and tend to feel more fear and anxiety because of the moving quality of vata. But they're also very creative, social, and tend to be good communicators. Anything that's to do with movement of ideas, creativity, words. If vata is in balance, then that tends to be people with vata are very interesting to be around. Now, with pitta, the fire element, intelligent, perceptive, discriminating, sharp. So, pitta is a sharpness, systematic, probing minds, and might be opinionated, self righteous, prone to anger, and lack compassion. So, we're talking about what's in balance and what is out of balance. Kapha is the earth and water. We tend to be more emotional, feel a lot of love and devotion, can be sentimental. In the book, Dr. Frawley talks about how we might be slower to learn something, but we'll retain it. Whereas someone with vata, for instance, might be quick to learn things, but then it kind of moves on. People with kapha like to bring things into form, so we're good finishers. This isn't true for me, but a lot of kapha people have traditional beliefs. They're kind of strong and steady in their beliefs. It's hard to shift them. Friendly, but not with strangers. And if it's out of balance, can have that kind of possessiveness or attached issues with attachment. So then these three, prana, tejas, and ojas, are the subtle components of vata, pitta, and kapha. So prana, we use this word all the time in yoga and meditation circles. It's the primal life force. So it's a subtle energy of air. And we could look at air as being movement of the physical air, but it also coordinates breath. On the inner level, it governs the higher states of consciousness. So with a good flow of prana, we have energy. We're able to respond to life, to the challenges of life, without losing our creativity and balance, emotional harmony. With tejas, this is related to pitta, and this is this inner radiance, the subtle energy of fire. So we digest impressions and thoughts. It helps with those higher perceptual capacities, like perception. So we perceive things and judge things correctly. It's also related to courage, fearlessness, and vigor. And then ojas is the primal vigor, the subtle energy of water. This is related to kapha. It's the essence of digested food, impressions, and thoughts. So on the inner level or the more subtle level, it gives us calm, nourishes higher states of consciousness. We're grounded. It holds the accumulated insight of will and spiritual aspiration, peace, and contentment. So these are three of the subtle. So we learned about vata, pitta, kapha. Now we're learning about prana, tejas, and ojas. And how do we actually work with that? So we can't heal without harmonizing our vital energies, these subtle essences. And we get these nutrients from food, heat, and air. And they're subtle and they're fed by impressions through the senses. So prana is this life-creating capacity. So it relates to having children, but it also relates to rejuvenating our body, our mind. And we absorb energy or prana through food, liquids, and breath. So prana is carried by the fluids of our body and is absorbed through hearing and touch. So if you think about breathing, for instance, if we're holding our breath because of being in a fear response or a freeze response, we don't get enough oxygen in our bloodstream. If we're not breathing out enough, we're not releasing enough of the waste products in our blood system. So it works on the physical level and it also works on the energetic level. Oftentimes, just taking a few deep breaths, it just changes our energy, our sense of who we are. And tejas is the essence of heat, and it's fed visually. So prana is hearing and touch. Tejas is fed visually. So things that we see, if you were to really tune into a beauty of a child or a horse or a sunset, those are things that build that inner vigor. So it's related to courage and daring, which relates, of course, to the fire element and this kind of inward vigor and decisiveness. And then Ojas, the subtle quality of kapha, is promoting endurance for sex and sustained exercise, and it is fed through taste and smell. So this is such an overview of these qualities. It's just kind of interesting to know that they're there. And if you're interested in going deeper, a book by Dr. David Frawley is a really wonderful resource. And it's also, there's a lot of other resources available to learn more about this. So as we're doing a relaxation practice, for instance, we're working with the 5 koshas, the layers or sheaths. We always start with the physical body, the most manifest or the least subtle. Then that's the Annamaya kosha, the body made of food. Then we work with the Pranamaya kosha, which is the body made of energy. And then we go up into the lower level of the mind and the higher level of the mind. So this kind of system still works with those general layers. First, we take care of some of the physical issues. If we have an imbalanced vata, we might start eating more moisture in our foods, syrupy things, soups, nourishing, warm. If you have a lot of fire and pitta, you might want to be eating some of the calmer things. But then when we get into the subtle essences, we also want to be working with what we're bringing in through our senses. So this is another way to kind of look at that. And then the main part of what we're doing today I wanted to work with is the understanding the nature of the mind. So this is probably pretty familiar to people who are involved with meditation. Some of these have a little bit of a subtle, different way of explaining it, though, which I thought was really interesting. So the mind is an object, and any object can be witnessed. So in this sense, we're witnessing the workings of the mind, and we are the perceiver. So it's possible for us to get to know about the mind, and we do this all the time. We witness our thoughts. We notice if we're ruminating, if we're catastrophic thinking, if we're zoning out. We learn how to witness the fluctuations of the mind. The mind is also an instrument. So he's talking about the eye as an instrument of seeing, and our brain is an instrument through which the subtle mind works. So again, it's an instrument. We are not our mind. The mind is an instrument. So we're going kind of up some levels here. Awareness is a constant, unbroken sense of self or being. Awareness is this ongoing ability we have to observe, witness, and perceive. And awareness is not located in time and space. The mind is. So the mind has a general sense of where we are. We construct that timeline through memory, through our experiences. And awareness is not like that. It's not located in time and space. So the mind is the instrument that awareness works through. There's awareness, and awareness has this tool, this instrument. And true awareness is pure consciousness beyond the mental field. When we're working with, for instance, if we're going into deeper meditation, oftentimes they'll say, take your attention away from what's moving, which is the activities of the mind, and bring your attention to what is still. And as we're bringing our attention to what is still, we're going lower than the mental field. We're going into pure consciousness. And the mind is a kind of organism that's organically related to the physical body. So the physical body has a brain. The brain has functions. We can perceive what's going on with the mind. And we don't have a mind without our physical body. We do have awareness. Awareness is not limited to the body or to time and space. Let's take a breath or two and just sit with that for a minute. What's your experience with that? And what difference does it make to know that? Or even if you don't agree with it. The mind is an instrument that awareness works through. True awareness is pure consciousness beyond the mental field. This is a way that Dr. Frawley's talking about how we construct reality. So we have all these little points of observations, of perceptions. The mind doesn't actually notice everything at once, it just notices little bits. So he's talking about a series of lightning flashes more than a continuous stream of awareness. So the mind is always in motion, and the mind is the prime point from which ideas of time and space are constructed. So we're talking again about the mind that is the tool of awareness. So we can't arrive at the whole through these fragments. So each mind has its own points and perspectives. And he's saying this is an expression of limitations. This is not an expression of wholeness. The mind makes up our reality through the perceptions that we have. So we have all of these little points. And sometimes you look at the drawings that are made up of just little points of pencils or something. And over time, as they fill in those points, you can start to see, oh, I'm starting to get a sense of a face or of a nose or something. So he's saying the mind is like that. It just pulls out all of these little things, and then it gathers all the evidence that it has, and then it makes a bunch of leaps or assumptions. And from there, it constructs its reality. And that when we withdraw our awareness from our senses, our physical body, we still have all of the thoughts and feelings. So we still have all of what was projected onto the screen, the mind. So we still have all of that. And the mind isn't still, but we can go deeper than the mind. We can leave the mind as a tool behind and go deeper into awareness, where the stillness is. I thought we could do a few minutes of experimentation here. So let's start with a tree. You can look at the image on the screen if you want, or if you've got a tree outside your window, you could look at that. We'll take a few minutes with each of these. So if you bring your attention to a tree, you could close your eyes and imagine a tree. What are some of the points of perception? In this picture, we have a trunk, we have a ground, we have color, we have shape. We assume that it's spring since there are blossoms on the tree. It's not a forest, it's a manicured lawn, so we would make some assumptions about that. Notice when you direct your attention to this tree or to a different one, see if you could pull apart all of the different pieces that your mind puts together to form that idea of a tree. And of course, we bring in a bunch of other things too from our past experience. So we might know what kind of tree this is. We might bring in concern about the environment. Is this tree getting enough oxygen? We also might bring in a gratitude that this tree is taking in the carbon dioxide that we breathe out and then breathing out oxygen to us. There's a lot of different elements in our mind when we look at a tree and form the idea of a tree. And now let's work with emotion. Those really strong emotions tend to blow through. The example he's talking about is look at how closely love and hate are bound together and how emotions fluctuate like waves on the sea. If you were to bring in a neutral emotion, something that's not very strong, maybe just a sense of an appreciation for the clerk at the store who was nice to you and you had a nice little interaction for a moment. Where you look around the space that you're in and you appreciate what's there. And then if you bring your attention to something or someone that you hate, maybe you hate reckless drivers or you hate people who smoke. whatever that might be, bring to mind something that you have a very strong negative emotion about. Notice how that feels in your body, what's happening in your body as you're noticing that. Usually, when we bring that up, we bring it up with images, with words. Might be specific memories. Notice how that feels in your body. Did your breath change? Do you have sensation? And then switch it over now to someone or something that you love. Let go of the negative and focus now on the positive. You might be working with the same thing or something different. Notice that it's rarely stable. So if I think about one of my grandchildren, for instance, I love them. I kind of have an internal smile when I think about them. And I also really want them to be happy. And then my mind might go to something else. But how could they be happy with everything that's going on in the world? Or so notice what's happening with your thoughts as well. Do we have these emotions? Let's stay with the love for a moment, for something, someone. We give it about a minute and see what else is coming through. Notice your body and your breath as well. Now, notice how hard it is to just maintain your awareness of the love. Emotions just kind of flow, they fluctuate. And then think back or review your last minute or two and notice how thoughts came in. So one thought follows the next thought follows the next. It's like it moves obsessively in its memory grooves. So we have so many associations. We talk about this all the time. We have associations with the sensations and energy in our body because of stored trauma. But also, that's how the mind works. It takes all these little points and brings them into some kind of a coherent belief or perception. We have this compulsive, erratic flow of thoughts. Sometimes we can trace one point to the next to the next. Oftentimes, we're just like somewhere completely different. We're like, wow, how did I ever get here? And so now let's look at ego, this I thought. So, this is the inherent reference point, the center of the mind. Basically, we're all self referenced or self centered. Everything in the world originates here in us, in our own mind, our own sense of who we are. And we care about other people, but really, if you were to just take a minute or two to tune into what is my reference point for everything else, it's really how it affects us. So what we see out of our own eyes is what we see. The memories that we have that are coming up are our own memories. Our responses are based on our past, a lot of it. A lot of it's based on our nervous system. And notice the random thoughts that come into the mind and how they relate back to me, the I thought or the ego. Sometimes it's like with fear, it's like, is this health concern going to get worse? So we're, of course, and I'm not at all saying this is wrong. It's just this is the way the mind works. Is it going to get worse? What's going to happen in the future? We get into catastrophic thinking. We might have an outrage about something. How dare they treat me like that? We might have shame. We have this recall of a memory or a look on someone's face where they showed us contempt, and then we go back into our memory and we feel that in our body. All related to me. So this is the mind. This isn't awareness. This isn't pure consciousness that we're talking about. This is the tool of awareness, the mind. So if you were to let yourself go through these levels, so we go through the level of direct perception. We have the I thought. We have our emotions, our memories, our perceptions about things. And if you were to think about all of that as happening kind of on the surface of a lake, the whole functioning of the mind happens at that level. And then let yourself go deeper. So bring your attention away from what's moving. Bring your attention away from the activities of the mind. And bring your attention into awareness, into the stillness in the mind. And notice that probably thoughts will come into the mind. You can notice those, and we can still remain in touch with awareness at the same time. We can use the mind and be aware of the mind as a tool or an instrument of awareness. And then also be aware of awareness itself.